A fast-paced journey showing how ketchup evolved from ancient fish sauce in China, through mushrooms in England, tomatoes in America, and surprising variants worldwide, proving the condiment's origin is far stranger than anyone thinks. Ketchup didn't start with tomatoes, it started with rotting fish. 17th century China. Fishermen ferment anchovies into a salty sauce called ketchup. British sailors taste it. They're obsessed. Back in England, they can't get the fish, so they improvise. Mushroom ketchup becomes the British standard for 100 years. 1820s, America. A scientist named James Mees adds tomatoes. It's red, it's sweet, it explodes. This is the ketchup we know. Meanwhile, the Philippines runs out of tomatoes during World War II. They make banana ketchup instead. It's still everywhere. Post-war Berlin. A street vendor mixes ketchup with curry powder. Currywurst is born. Germans eat 800 million servings a year. So who invented ketchup? China, England, America? The answer's still fermenting. Fish sauce didn't begin as food. It began as survival. On a humid coastline in South China, fishermen pack tiny fish into clay jars. They bury them under heavy salt. They seal the lids tight. Then they wait. Days turn into weeks. The sun heats the jars. The fish breaks down. A dark amber liquid rises to the top. Sharp, salty, powerful. This isn't a fancy sauce. It's a tool, a way to keep protein from rotting, a way to carry flavor without fire, without ice, without time. Jars move from dock to dock, from boats to markets, from one coastline to another. The smell travels before the ships do. So does the habit. People learn the trick. Salt, seal, ferment, turn too much fish into lasting taste. A few drops can change a whole bowl of rice. And here's the twist. Fish sauce doesn't just spread as a product, it spreads as an idea. Preserve something strong, concentrate it, bottle it, ship it. That method becomes a blueprint for sauces across the world. Different ingredients, same logic. So the world's most famous condiments didn't start with tomatoes or sugar. They started with a sealed jar of fish, sweating in the sun. Fish sauce was never just fish. England wants that power too. But the ocean is a wall. The jar stays, the salt stays, the fish disappears, and mushrooms take its place. British sailors in the late 1600s discovered a potent secret in Southeast Asia, ketchup. This fermented fish sauce added deep, savory flavor to rice. They brought the concept home, but the recipe failed. England lacked the intense tropical sun required to ferment fish guts. Instead, the damp British climate offered a different ingredient: mushrooms. By the early 1700s, English cooks developed a new method. They filled earthenware crocks with gathered field mushrooms. They layered the fungi with heavy salt and let the jars sit for days. The salt attacked the cells and drew out the dark natural juices. The mushrooms collapsed into a black mash. Cooks strained this liquid through a cloth, discarding the solids. They boiled the remaining dark nectar with spices like mace, cloves, and pepper. The result looked nothing like the condiment on a modern hamburger. It was thin, bitter, and jet black. It functioned as a flavor bomb for bland meat pies and gravies, similar to modern Worcestershire sauce. For over a century, the word ketchup strictly meant mushrooms. The tomato stole the crown, but the black sauce built the kingdom. But the tomato did not take the crown easily. For decades, Europeans and Americans feared the fruit. They called it the poison apple because it belonged to the deadly nightshade family. It took a bold American scientist in 1812 to finally crush the fruit and the fear into a sauce. Early tomato ketchup was a dangerous gamble. The recipes lacked vinegar and relied on fermentation. Bottles frequently exploded in the pantry. To hide the brown, rotting color of the mixture, dishonest factories added coal, tar dye to turn it red. Then in 1876, Henry Heinz changed the industry with chemistry. He rejected the fermentation method. Instead, he used ripe red tomatoes and a heavy dose of distilled vinegar. The acid killed the bacteria, making the sauce shelf-stable and safe. Heinz made a second radical choice. While competitors used brown glass to hide impurities, Heinz used clear glass. He wanted the world to see the purity of his product. The sauce hit every point on the human tongue: salty, sweet, sour, and savory. It conquered the global table. Today, 97% of American households own a bottle, but few realize that the thick red sauce was originally an engineering solution to stop exploding glass. But the American bottle could not cross the front lines of World War II. In the Philippines, supply ships stopped arriving. Soldiers and locals craved the tangy red sauce, but the islands lacked the climate to grow enough tomatoes. They did, however, have endless jungles of bananas. Enter Maria Orosa, a brilliant Filipino food chemist and war hero. She saw a country facing starvation and a surplus of rotting fruit. She refused to let the food go to waste. Orosa mashed the local Saba bananas, mixing the sweet paste with vinegar, sugar, and spices to mimic the acidity of the missing American import. The chemistry worked. The fermentation created a savory, umami-rich flavor profile almost identical to tomato ketchup. But the appearance was a failure. The natural sauce was a dull, unappetizing, brownish yellow. It looked nothing like the comfort food everyone missed. Orosa solved this with a visual lie. She added a heavy dose of red dye to the mixture. The sauce instantly looked like the American original. It became a wartime staple, fueling guerrilla fighters and starving civilians alike. Maria Orosa was tragically killed by shrapnel while feeding others during the liberation of Manila. But her red invention survived. Today in the Philippines, ketchup is sweet, red, and made of fruit. As the Pacific War ended, a new culinary collision began in the ruins of Berlin. American and British soldiers brought their own rations into the occupied city. While the Philippines used bananas to survive, a German woman named Herta Heuber traded local spirits for British spices. She was about to turn a simple condiment into a national obsession. Berlin, 1949. The city was a wasteland of rubble and hunger. Herta Heuber stood at her street stand in the British occupation zone, desperate to spice up the bland post-war diet. She bartered with British soldiers, trading German alcohol for two foreign ingredients: tomato ketchup and curry powder. She didn't just mix them. She simmered the sauce with secret spices and poured it over a sliced, grilled pork sausage. It was cheap, hot, and tasted of an empire Germans had never seen. The currywurst was born. It wasn't just a snack. It was an affordable luxury for workers rebuilding the nation. Heuer patented her chill-up sauce in 1959, refusing to sell the recipe to giant corporations. Her stand stayed open for decades, serving thousands every day. The sauce became a cultural icon, bridging the gap between American mass production and Indian spice. Today, Germans consume over 800 million servings of currywurst every year. The ultimate twist? The most famous German street food depends entirely on a sauce invented by the British and perfected by the Americans. But currywurst was just the final link in a global chain. For 500 years, ketchup has been a shapeshifter, adapting to wars, climates, and cultural tastes. It didn't have one eureka moment or a single genius creator. Instead, it was an accidental masterpiece built by thousands of hands across 3 continents. The search for a single inventor of ketchup is a fool's errand. The story began in Asian ports as a salty fish brine. It traveled on wooden ships where sailors swapped fish for mushrooms to survive the voyage. In English country kitchens, it transformed into a dark, spicy liquid. In American fields, it finally turned red. Every major breakthrough was actually a desperate reaction to a problem. When fish guts wouldn't ferment in cold England, they used fungi. When American tomatoes rotted too fast, they used vinegar and clear glass to prove safety. When World War II cut off trade, they used bananas. Ketchup is not a recipe, it is a survivor. It is a liquid map of global trade routes and human ingenuity. It proves that the most traditional foods are often the most chaotic mixtures of foreign ideas. The ultimate twist is that the bottle on the table today is a 500-year-old game of telephone played with salt, sugar, and vinegar. The world didn't invent ketchup, it evolved it.